there, grief growers, and welcome to another Facebook Live on Monday at 1 o'clock Central Time or Chicago time. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Today, I just have something really casual for you and really exciting and humbled and grateful and kind of just a tie-in with everything that I talked about on this week's episode of Coming Back, which is my 1-year podcast anniversary celebration. I am celebrating being a podcaster, podcasting, having an active public-facing show for exactly 1 year. So a week ago today, on May 14th, 2018 was my 1-year anniversary. So May 14th, 2017 is when I released the very first episode of Coming Back called Intro, and just kind of let people know what the show was about, what I was going to do with my airtime, with my voice, with my message in the world, and kind of just see where we went. And honestly, when I started the show, I didn't really know, like with most things when you start a project, you don't really know what it's going to be, but you have an intention starting off, and then you go slowly forward. You go week by week, you go show by show, you go interview by interview, and gradually it morphs into something that's discernible, that has an identity, that has a community, that has a life of its own, which is really cool, very phenomenal. I've been doing a lot of internal celebrating and external celebrating regarding the podcast this week, and that's just been very cool. Really quickly, before I forget, I want to remind you that if you missed it, I hosted a live 1 hour, full-on kind of a coming back celebration party. I called it a podcast anniversary party in my private Facebook group, The Grief Growers Garden. So if you are on Facebook and you are not yet a member of the Grief Growers Garden, I did exactly this, but I went live for an entire hour within the private Facebook group, so everybody that was a member got notified. Altogether, I think we had anywhere between about 30 and 50 people show up within the course of it, and they were asking questions on how I get started, how I'm able to create a container for grief and nourish myself outside of the show and outside of the podcast, who my dream podcast guests would be if I could have them on the show, and tips for dealing with grief and insomnia, maybe tips for dealing with grief with friends or other resources. So it was a very, very fun hour-long, a little over an hour-long event that I hosted there in the Grief Growers Garden, and it's definitely available there for replay. It will exist there for all time, but it's definitely an exclusive thing as well, and so something that's only available to the private community of folks who are in the Grief Growers Garden. So if you'd like to join, just search the Grief Growers Garden on Facebook and click join, and then there's 3 questions that you have to answer to be allowed to enter the group. They are, have you experienced a loss? Are you able to support people in their losses? And an email address so you can become part of my exclusive email list, where I send out invites to things like the 1 hour long podcast anniversary party, as well as updates on new episodes of the show as they appear, and exclusive giveaways that I host when I take breaks from the show periodically, which is very, very cool. So definitely a great little community to be in if you're not part of it already, and you get kind of more of that exclusive behind the scenes stuff and group support, especially if you are actively dealing with a loss right now, if you're actively grieving a loss or looking for resources to help somebody who is. So definitely a great place to be and to start here on Facebook. Another reminder that I'll tell you about this evening is that I am hosting my 1 hour long Google Hangout, and this is different than a Facebook Live because Google Hangout is exclusive for those who support me on Patreon. And Patreon is a service kind of like crowdsourcing or crowdfunding, but on a recurring basis, where people who really appreciate the show, who love the work that I'm doing, who see now that I've been going for over a year strong, say, I really want to support the work that you're doing. I love the show. It's helped my life. It's impacted me in the way I deal with grief. I want to give a little bit something back. So it's kind of this reinforcing loop where they give to me and then I provide things in return as well, like this exclusive Google Hangouts time, and that is happening later this evening at 7 p.m. Over on Google Hangouts, and you can even pledge as late as today. You can pledge to support the show as late as today and still receive an invite to that Google Hangout where you can chat with me one-on-one once a month, and that happens every single month of the year, which is really, really cool. We've had some very cool conversations over there. I'm just in a space today where I feel like saying thank you, just being grateful and reminding you that I'm still here, I'm still continuing to go, and this little grief podcast is slowly becoming bigger than me. I'm getting chills as I'm saying this. And lately what I've been telling people when they ask me what the show is when I talk about it, I say, I am creating what I most needed in the midst of my loss. I am creating the voice, the resource bank, the interview, encyclopedia, the vocabulary, the community. These are all the things that I needed in the midst of my own loss that I wish I could find in one place somewhere. And so being able to create that through coming back through the show is almost like making something, like making a gift and then giving it to my younger self, giving it to my past self, giving it to myself who is still grieving. And it's just very, very cool. It's almost a surreal experience, but at the same time, it's one of my greatest gifts. This is one of my biggest life accomplishments, and I know we're really just getting started. So a lot of gratitude just flowing into this week, a lot of reflection, a lot of, just looking at this group and being awestruck by how things have progressed in the last year and where things still have yet to go. I still have an email inbox full of your questions and suggestions and things you want to hear on the show. I've got guests, knocking on my door, and I'm actively seeking them out as well because their stories are so important and they all need to be shared. So I'm just really stoked to be here with you today and to be celebrating this milestone. This is kind of my last big hurrah, this Facebook Live, because this Wednesday I'm coming out with a new episode and we'll kind of get back to our regular grind on the podcast. But just pausing. This is really important in grief, to be able to pause and say, yes, this is important. Let's look at this. Let's celebrate this. Let's say thank you for the fact that this is happening. Let's look back and see what we've done, and let's look forward and see where we need to go. So, yeah, a space of celebration, kind of a ritual of honoring this first milestone. So thank you for being with me. I would absolutely love to see you either in the Grief Growers Garden or on Patreon or both. That would be so phenomenal of you. And thank you. Just thank you for supporting me through this first year, in this first year. If you are really new to coming back, I'm glad to have you here. If you've been here since day one, I'm really glad to have you here as well. We're all grieving together, and if we're not grieving right now, we are going to grieve. So this information, these tools, these resources, these interviews are all things that are going to be helpful, that are going to be impactful, that are going to be important to us at some point or another. And it's such an honor to literally be this channel for you, for this work, for this grief, for this space. Yeah. A short one today. I see you. I am proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, my beautiful grief growers, happy podcast anniversary, we are growing. I'll see you next week.